Good morning, Internet. It is 7 in the morning, and as always, I am here ready to talk to you about education, parenting, and homeschooling. Let me just get this correct. If I could be frank, I am absolutely exhausted. But it might not be for the reasons that you think. Last night at about 8 o'clock, as I do every night, I put my little boy to sleep. And after he went to sleep, I cleaned up the mess he had made, and he's only 13 months old, so I have him clean a little bit, but he doesn't take care of everything. And by the time I was done cleaning up the mess and making myself and my wife dinner and getting everything together, it was about 11 o'clock. So I got into bed and I was sleeping by 12. For many of us that are parents, we know that sleeping through the night isn't a luxury that we always get to enjoy. But when we do, it's really nice. But as we have it, my little boy has his teeth coming in, and he woke up at about 2 in the morning, very upset. And my wife and I remained up until about 3:40 a.m. trying to get him to go to sleep. That's what parenting is. Yet, like I do every morning, the alarm went off at 6 a.m., barely any sleep, you can see it in my eyes, and I woke up. And the reason I woke up is I want the world to be a better place. I want the world to be a better place for my little boy. And the primary way that I can do that is to live as a role model of effort, of how a person should live their lives, that no matter how tired, no matter how sick, whatever it is, I should get out of bed every morning at 6 a.m. and work toward achieving a goal. And in this case, a specific goal, an inspiring goal, to change the world, to assist parents in being better parents, so that their children could grow up strong and the world can be a better place. Being such a role model is how we do that. But it's not just a role model in work, in success, in making money. It's a role model in morality, doing what is right every day in my life and living as an example. So you can see that I'm tired, but I'm here. But I'm not tired. I didn't lose sleep for the reasons you might think. The real reason I'm tired is I was up all night tossing and turning because I had found out about 2 bills that the government wishes to pass. In Oregon and Washington, legislators are attempting to pass SB 526, a provision that mandates visits from state agents to all homes with newborn babies. The government says any newborn baby is at risk for abuse and neglect. Isn't that rich? It's hard to imagine anything, any institution in human history being more abusive and more neglectful of children and the citizenry at large than the state. Look at the foster care program. How does the state do with that? Do you see the rampant rates of physical and sexual abuse coming out of foster care? I once made a documentary on Jerry Sandusky, the Penn State football coach, who, as it turned out, was a serial pedophile. And although the media covered it up, it turned out that he was procuring many of the young boys from the South Philadelphia Boys and Girls Club because the government does such a poor job running their foster care programs that many of the trafficked, sexually abused children come directly from them. Of course, these children, having undergone tremendous trauma in their lives, many grow up to be drug addicts. And what does the government do? The government takes nonviolent offenders doing drugs, trying to numb the pain of the very childhood that the government was complicit in help creating. and they lock them in cages with violent criminals. Non-violent offenders go into jail, and by the time they come out, they are experts, hardened criminals ready to bring violence to the general population. They no longer have any skills, they can no longer be hired. But what does the government care? It looks good when they go for re-election. Of course, many of these drug users are parents themselves, and they've been locked in jails. Did you know that America is the only country in the world that has a bigger problem with male rape than female rape? Because when these non-violent drug offenders are put into prison with these extremely violent, hardened offenders, many of them are raped. You heard that correctly, more males than females. And of course, their children grow up without parents themselves, which leads to a cycle, which leads to their children doing drugs. If their children do wind up to grow up and be strong and sovereign and independent, the government will make sure that they are robbed at the point of a gun, that half of their income is taken via taxation under the guise of altruism. Again, the government's just stepping in to make the world a better place. And then, of course, their children will be mandated to attend government schools. 12 years, 10 months a year, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, plus homework. Every little bit of a child's sovereignty and creativity is eroded by this school system. They're turned into factory workers. It's not bad enough that children spend all of their free time, their most creative years, switching from classroom to classroom when a bell tells them to get up and move somewhere else every 45 minutes. But when they go home, any extra time they have, they're forced to do homework. Their childhood is destroyed. Rites of passage are denied. We live in a society perpetuated by government schooling in which 25-year-olds' behavior is indistinguishable from 15-year-olds' behavior. I can't tell if 15-year-olds act 25 or 25-year-olds act 15. Childhood has been extended. Now that is abusive. That is neglectful. Just look back a couple of hundred years. Thomas Jefferson, the man behind me to my right, Thomas Jefferson, ran his family plantation on his own at the ripe age of 12. Ben Franklin, the little cartoon with the kite behind me, was the editor of a statewide newspaper when he was only 13 years old. What is more abusive than that? They have taken away our children's childhoods, and they have extended childhood into adulthood so that people do not grow up and become independent, confident young adults. Any child that does not conform to the school system is quickly put on drugs, especially young boys. School psychologists, social workers call up parents and say, your child's not following along, your child's not staying in their seat, your child wants to get up and explore, and because of that, there is something wrong with your child and they must be put in line. Isn't that convenient? From the same government that locks people in cages with violent offenders to be raped, to be abused, to be left with no skills and unhireable for the act of doing drugs. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about Big Pharma, because our government, our media, are all subservient to the money that Big Pharma spends. The health insurance industry, as well as the pharmaceutical industry, are the two largest spenders on lobbyists. They don't spend that money for no reason. They spend that money to buy our government, to buy our children, to tell us that our government are the protectors of our children, that we as parents are abusive and neglectful, and our government is oh so benevolent. Their power is so strong that they make marijuana illegal all over the country. People thrown in cages, and many times for decades, for using or selling marijuana. While at the same time, the big pharmaceutical companies work to synthesize marijuana. Get a patent on it, so when it is legalized, only the pharmaceutical industries can sell it. In Iowa, legislators are currently working to pass legislation, IAHF 272, that would require all homeschoolers to undergo quarterly health visits by school officials. Homeschoolers will be forced to take big pharma's drugs, of course, the vaccinations, because the one thing we can't have from subjects of the state is sovereign individuals making decisions on their own as to what is best for their children and is what is best for their family, what drugs should be put into the bodies of their children. And of course, school officials will visit homeschoolers every other month to make sure that children are being properly indoctrinated, that they are going over, reviewing, and understanding school textbooks. Because the one thing the state can't have is sovereign individuals who grow up thinking for themselves, who might question the very system that I have laid out before you, who might question the very relationship between big pharmaceutical companies, the health insurance industry, and the government. You will accept the government as your masters. The question is, what can we do? The first answer is to pick up the phone. Today, make sure you call legislators in Iowa, make sure you call legislators in the state of Washington and Oregon, and let them know how morally opposed you are to state compulsion, a violation of our Third Amendment rights. We shall not be forced to quarter soldiers. We shall not be forced to allow the government soldiers, whether they be military members or bureaucrats, to force their way into our homes to dictate how we raise and what we teach our children. But don't just stop there. We have to show them that parents are the best educators of children, that school is not education. To challenge our own children if old enough, and certainly they're old enough by 7, to pick up the phone themselves and call legislators in Oregon, to call legislators in Washington and Iowa, and get real-life experience pushing back against the system, not accepting what authority says their role in society is. Have your children pick up the phone. Have them call representatives and tell them about their experience with their parents, their experience being homeschooled if they have been lucky enough to be homeschooled. And don't just stop there. Have your children challenge them. Challenge them to write letters to state legislators, explaining their own experience, explaining why they are free, why they are sovereign, and why their homeschool experience has been better than public education experience. Have them write local newspapers. Their story, their letter might even get picked up. And if it does, you will see a child with the pride, knowing at the age of, I'd say 7+, their writing, their words, their creation were enough to make a true impact on the world. Imagine your child's face when they see their letter pushing back against state authoritarianism in the local newspaper. Now that is what homeschooling is. That is what education is. And that is where true motivation comes from. That is the rite of passage that an education gives that public schooling denies, because all public schooling is out of context work. Do this assignment for 45 minutes. No, you cannot choose what your assignment is. And when the bell rings after 45 minutes, you might as well crumple up that piece of paper because it doesn't mean a damn thing. We must stand up against authoritarianism so that our children have the ability to do the same. But we must empower our children by having them also understand their role as a sovereign citizen, to stand up against authoritarianism themselves. Watch how much more they learn from that compared to what they can ever learn from the school system. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please follow my secondary page, Classical Learner. Over the next few months, it will become the primary page, the only page that I post to. I'll post a link in the comments below after this re-uploads. Please follow Classical Learner on Facebook. And for those of you who don't yet follow my page, follow my YouTube channel that this is on, FFRnews. As always, I will post every morning at 7 a.m. via live stream. I hope you tune in. Power to the individual, and long live liberty.